Any views, discussions, or opinions expressed in this podcast do not represent in any way the opinions or positions of Stanford University, its staff, or its employees.
Welcome to the AI Frontiers podcast, a dialogue with tech pioneers hosted by a Stanford University Technology Training. I'm Don Cameron, and joining me here today, also from the technology training team, are John Kepler and Dong Liang. We are thrilled to have Dr. Theodor Grantchov, a professor of surgery and associate chief quality officer for innovation and safety at Stanford Healthcare. Joining us today. Renowned for his work in surgical safety, Dr. Grantchov pioneered the surgical black box concept, bringing modern safety systems into the OR. He founded the International Center for Surgical Safety and Surgical Safety Technologies, Inc., an academic startup focused on improving patient outcomes. With over 220 peer-reviewed publications, he is recognized globally for his contributions to surgical education and innovation. And Dr. Grantchov, we appreciate your taking the time out of your busy schedule today to join us. And thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you, Don and John and Dong. Thank you for having me, and looking forward to having a exciting conversation, engaging conversation today.
Great, thank you. And we just want to start things off. If you can give us a little bit of history about the development of the OR black box.
Yeah, absolutely. I started my surgical career in Copenhagen in Denmark over 25 years ago. And I remember in the early stages, I focused my research and later my PhD on developing virtual reality systems that could measure the skill of the operating surgeon. And at that time, that was unheard of. People didn't believe that there is a need to measure the skill of the surgeon because, of course, everyone is good enough. But we found that wasn't the case. We found that we could develop a system that could measure skill, and we found that there was a great variability in skill and performance of surgeons. And this was also the time when there was a lot of focus on outcomes research, looking at what happened to patients who underwent surgery, and that there was initial evidence, or that was emerging evidence at that point, that there was a great variability in outcomes. So it became the theme of my career and my academic and clinical and later entrepreneurial pursuit to create a data platform, an opportunity to study what happens in the operating room and how that could affect what happens to our patients and the way we deliver healthcare or surgical care to patients. I was also very interested throughout my life in aviation, and always, probably in the early days, I studied the majority of the disasters of major airlines. And it fascinated me to study how the airline industry was able to not only identify the chain of events that led to disaster, but create solutions that made the industry safer. Later on, I studied other high-risk industries like oil and nuclear, and there was a common theme there. The common theme was they were able to generate high-quality data, and they were able to make this transition from art and craft to science. And this is probably one of the major drivers for us to create this data platform that we call Operating Room Black Box. It captures high quality data that brings more transparency, more accountability, but also tremendous opportunities to learn from successes and mistakes, and continue this transition from art and craft to science that ultimately one day will help us make the transition in surgery from safe to ultra safe industry, just like the others.
Thank you. And since its inception, how has the technology evolved over the years?
Oh, it's been a long journey, as I mentioned, over 20 years. And I remember in the early days, we were capturing video from the surgical procedure on a VHS tape. I still have these boxes of VHS tapes, and then we manually reviewed, so a human had to watch the video and see and search for these deviations from the standard and search from or search for opportunities to improve. Obviously, that's not scalable. And over the years, we saw not only tremendous development in recording technology, but also tremendous developments in the way we process video and apply some of the modern developments in computer vision. So it's not necessarily anymore for a human to watch the video. A machine can do that in a much more accurate, reliable, and unbiased way.
Okay, and I was going to pass it over. If John or Dong have any questions, feel free to pipe in.
Now, in addition to the video images that are gathered, do you also track any actual data from monitoring devices and procedures and so on?
Yes, absolutely. So video is just one of the inputs. Video and audio are great sources for unstructured data. Excuse me. Video and audio are great sources for unstructured data, but we also capture data from multiple devices in the operating room, such as monitoring systems for the patient. We've introduced wearable technologies to capture biometric data from the surgical team. We can extract data from devices used in the operating room. So virtually unlimited number of data sources, both structured and unstructured, that get perfectly synchronized and that allow us to analyze holistically what happens in the operating room and identify these outliers that are either source of information of what we do exceptionally well or things that we don't do so well and we should focus, learn, and continuously improve.
Have there been?
Go ahead. Sorry, I was going to say that what or have you observed, like what kind of improvements have you seen or in the surgical outcomes or reductions in errors since implementing the technology?
Yeah, so we aggregate, so we capture the data, and that's a massive amount. It's approximately 10 to 15 gigabytes per operating room per hour. The black box is now in hundreds of ORs, and it captures data 24/7 and quickly growing. So you can imagine that this is a massive amount of data. The key, though, is not to capture the data. The key is how can we process this large amount of data into information that matters to frontline clinicians, nurses, surgeons, anesthesiologists, and hospital leaders that can make surgical care safer, but also more efficient, because there are constantly pressures to provide higher value care, which has been a challenge, particularly in the United States for a long time. So we package the information into three major buckets. One of it is information that's designed to improve efficiency, improve throughput, and reduce waste. The second one, like any high-risk industry, there are always standard operating procedures. So we want to measure whether we're compliant with these standard operating procedures. And probably one that's well known to the wider public is the surgical safety checklist, which was shown to reduce morbidity and mortality in operating rooms around the world. The third bucket of information that Black Box provides is related to safety, quality, and safety. So this is usually information that captures not only various key performance indicators around surgical performance, around team performance, around organizational design, but also outcomes, patient outcomes. So this, when we capture this information and deliver it to the hospital leadership or the frontline clinicians, surgeons, nurses, anesthesiologists, we've seen a number of initiatives that were designed to make the OR safer. And recently there was a very interesting study published out of one of our collaborators at UT Southwestern in Texas, looking at the implementation of the OR black box and using the information that it generates to drive corporate strategic quality improvement interventions, and showed that there was reduction in morbidity, mortality, and certain never events in their operating theaters by introducing data-driven quality improvement interventions, as opposed to the one-size-fits-all interventions based on traditions and dogmas. We've also demonstrated very exciting improvement results with the efficiency initiatives that we've powered. And that relates to reducing turnover times, reducing overtimes, improving throughput, reducing waste. And we've shown that there is a tremendous need and tremendous opportunity to deliver high quality care at a much lower cost, which is a challenge today, but I think it will be even more relevant challenge in the future.
Now, has the data been used at all in training any AI models?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I recently looked at some of our databases, and we've, over the years since we launched the first prototype in Toronto in 2014, we've accumulated several million hours of video capture and billions of data points. So we've obviously, with the development of and the launch of so many data science initiatives and various aspects of AI, like computer vision and other methodologies, we've developed several models that we've deployed today. I mentioned a little bit earlier that in the early days we had a human watching every minute of video that we captured, and today we've developed models that can review surgical video and surgical audio and extract educational opportunities or extract segments where there is a deviation from the normal course of the operation, and use those to either power training initiatives or power quality improvement initiatives. So we've seen a tremendous evolution, not only in the amount of data, but also our ability to process massive amounts of data at lower cost, that allows us now to deliver these solutions not only to well-funded academic institutions here in the United States, Western Europe, and Canada, but also in countries where these solutions are needed most. And it's really fascinating to see how these initiatives have resulted in better education, better performance, and better clinical outcomes.
Now, certainly there are many different types of surgeries. Has there been specific improvements in a specific area of surgery, or have the benefits really been equal across the board?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we started, our initial work was primarily focusing on general surgery, and over time we quickly expanded to other surgical specialties. Now it is delivered in any surgical specialty, so usually institutions deploy the black box technology across the entire enterprise. We've also gone outside surgery, so we've seen some exciting developments of this technology in other areas like emergency rooms and trauma rooms to help us better understand the processes there that need improvement and understand how improvement in these processes translate into better clinical outcomes. We've recently started also deploying it in cath labs. We're also working on a number of new initiatives that will expand it even further in other high-risk areas in the modern hospital. So to answer your question, John, we started with a very limited scope, and now a lot of the models that we've developed are transferable, and certainly we see that as an enterprise system rather than a focused system for one or two surgical specialties.
What were some of the oh, sorry, go ahead.
Regarding some technical details of this operation, which I'm interested in, I was reading this MIT Technology Review article, which tells a lot about how this thing works. And when I was reading it, it sounds like very much like supervised human labeling kind of learning. But you just mentioned something, seems like you are moving from that to unsupervised learning. So that is considered evolution. And curiously reminds me of how Tesla's training is full self-drive, the end-to-end neural networks. You just give it like tons of human drivers, how they react to certain things, and then expect to get something, a structured output from that. Do you see that analogy, the comparison relevant? And then are you sort of want to do something similar, go down that path?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So starting with the analogy to autonomous vehicle development, it is indeed quite similar. Surgery is probably a little more complex than
Definitely.
even though it is a complex challenge in autonomous vehicle driving, and we've seen tremendous opportunities there. There is a lot of uncertainties, and there are a lot of deviations from normal course. It's not just a vehicle on a road, on a busy road in a good clear day. It is analogous probably to driving a vehicle with no roads in a horrible weather every single day. But fundamentally the approach is very similar, and one of our goals for the future is to provide real-time decision support to the clinical teams that will make their performance less variable.
Something like early collision warning.
Yes, early collision.
You are about to commit a serious error. Just be careful.
Very similar, wow. And we've had some prototypes that we've been working on that we can see this reality in the very near future. But to the first part of your question, how we train these models, it's absolutely right. I think in the early days we knew that we had access to a lot of data, but we wanted to understand what are the clinical questions that we're trying to answer here, and what is the value to frontline clinicians. We didn't want to create technology for technology's sake, or just to train foundational models that will never make it to reality or to the bedside. So we started with clinical questions. We then brainstormed what type of information we needed in order to answer these clinical questions, and then brainstormed what kind of data points we needed in order to deliver or create this information and deliver this information. So it started as a very slow, heavy manual operation where we labeled data, and we had almost a data labeling university that we created in Toronto. And in the early days, there were a lot of people who spent a lot of time, a lot of long days to label the data in a way that mattered to us. and now we're moving outside that into processing massive amounts. I remember in the early days we processed maybe 100 procedures a month, maybe even less, and now we process tens of thousands.
That's truly
I have
remarkable.
so I have another question that just came to my head now. Given that possibilities, so are you aware there's a company called Intuitive Surgical? They are doing like robotics operations. Do you see a future where, once the model is properly trained, they can you can give the job to the robots, right? Because now you train the model to know what to do, and then those robots they can execute those commands. Do
Yeah,
you see that as
definitely.
future?
Yes, definitely. I definitely see that as an opportunity. I think it's not in the immediate future. The robot that Intuitive or the Da Vinci robot is not a truly autonomous robot. It's
Operated by humans.
it's operated by human, but definitely it provides some incredible tools that the human wrist doesn't have. And I think if we combine that with the decision support and especially some of the because there are a number of people in the usually a surgery is a team effort. There are a lot of people participating. There are a lot of data points that probably a single surgeon can't process in real time always adequately. I think our belief is that a human plus a robot, a very dexterous robot, and the decision support tool that the black box could serve us will provide better quality care than a human alone or a human and a robot alone. So I think the future is probably is collaborative, and the future is of surgery is data driven.
How do you address like any kind of resistance you get from surgeons who are not too keen on moving forward with a kind of monitoring system like this?
I mean, I think every time we introduce a disruptive technology, it's obviously never 100% positive response. There are also always someone who feel that this is it is breaking some cultural barriers. It was the same with black box in aviation. When it was introduced in the 60s, not all pilots were thrilled about this. And still there are pilots who feel that there is some invasion in privacy. However, for those surgeons who have experienced access to this type of data, access to this information, access to an opportunity to see what they do right and what they do wrong, and even more importantly, what they can do in order to be better. It's life-changing. It changed the way I did surgery. I remember the first time I watched my own video, and I saw so many opportunities for improvement that I didn't see while I was in the middle of the action. So once and it's the same with all of us. I mean, we all have tracking devices now. We got Apple Watch or whatever wearable technology we use to track our performance, to track our activity. We know how much how much value it can bring to us in this continuous improvement. So there is a saying that if you can't measure it, you can't improve it, and that's what the black box does. And we see it especially with the younger generation of surgeons and nurses and anesthesiologists and hospital leaders. They feel that the best way to improve is to use data. That the best way to learn is to use high quality information and not how it was done in the old days, where it was a craft that required years and years of training and a lot of traditions and a lot of dogmas. I think that time is passing, yeah, there will be people who feel that the good old days of surgical craft and surgical art need to come back. I think it is if we want to turn surgery into an ultra safe, predictable, and transparent industry, it is inevitable that we have to go through a process of more transparency and data-driven decisions.
You mentioned that you had some entrepreneurial interests. Would you be kind enough to share with us a little bit about those?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started this as a research project. I started this, obviously that has been my research, my focus of my academic career since I was a junior resident. I clearly remember when I was driving home one day after we published another paper, and I felt that we generated a lot of evidence. I felt that we could make surgery so much better. We could make surgical education so much better, but I felt that there was something missing in the purely academic approach. I felt that this academic circle of academic work started with an idea, then it went through securing funding to prove it, and then executing the research study, and then publishing or presenting the study, and it stopped there. I felt that there was something missing, which was this last step, which was moving the research or translating the research to reality, to the bedside, to the patient, to the frontline staff. And I was thinking, how can I make sure that my research doesn't end up on a shelf, or that the article doesn't end up on a shelf that nobody reads. So I felt that the best way to do that is to use commercialization vehicles, and that's how surgical safety technologies was born.
You have any other questions, Don or Don?
I was going to give Don another opportunity if he had one.
No, I'm good.
All
I was
right.
just nodding. I noticed that surgical safety technology, the article says your son is also part of the company, so you're like working as a team. That is great.
Yeah, there are 70 people in the company.
Wow.
So it's we've tried to recruit as many people that could help there as possible, and obviously we recruit also a lot of talented people also from Stanford and other top engineering schools.
And
Wonderful.
you also mentioned about some of the advancements that are coming in the coming years or so. Do you have any other advanced or features you're thinking of that can incorporate into other aspects of healthcare for the black box?
Yeah, so as I said, we started in surgery. We're expanding now to emergency and trauma. We're expanding to cath labs. We're working on some interesting applications in intensive care units, for GI suites, for patient rooms. So we feel that this is the fundamental philosophy of turning healthcare from craft to science will benefit in each of the healthcare specialties. So yes, we have started expanding outside the OR, and we'll see even more in other areas, clinical areas.
I am curious, have the insurance, the malpractice policy issuers taken an interest in this data, and do they use it for their actuarials and in sort of has it affected rates in any capacity?
It's a great point. No, the answer is yes.
Yes.
They are interested that we have very similar interests. So what we as clinicians and malpractice insurers have the same interest, which is how can we reduce risk and how can we make clinical operations safer so the patient care doesn't result in adverse outcomes, which then can turn into lawsuits and cost hospitals and society in general a lot of resources. So we've in the early days we collaborated very closely, and we still do with certain malpractice insurers around understanding risk, predicting risk, and creating innovative strategies to reduce and mitigate risk. So whether it will result in lower premiums, it hasn't materialized everywhere. But there are some initiatives, and I remember there is some exciting, innovative work out of one of the insurers in the Boston area, Boston hospitals, that have incentivized hospitals to invest in simulation training, with the hypothesis that the doctors who train on simulators will provide better care and they'll be better prepared to care for patients. And they've had some successful initiatives in reducing malpractice or reducing premiums for physicians and hospital groups that have engaged in simulation training. And with that, we certainly see this opportunity here as well, because if we introduce data-driven approaches to understand the risks and patterns of risks and to use this information to improve quality, safety, and reduce and improve outcomes, that will translate into better outcomes and fewer lawsuits.
I know any surgeon's time is quite valuable, so this was a great conversation. I think it will be helpful for many others to also learn from it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grantraub, for joining us today and sharing this information. That brings us to the end of this episode of AI Frontiers, Dialogue with Tech Pioneers. We hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Teodor Grantraub. Thank you for listening, and until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the frontiers of AI.